With that, I'm going to turn it over for a few minutes to Derek Whitfield. He wants to talk about some stuff specific to the Indianapolis area. So, Derek, have at it.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate you having me on tonight and giving me a few minutes at the beginning of our workshop for tonight. I want to welcome all of you all, 147 people so far. That's not bad. That's 147 more umpires that are dedicated and wanting to get better tonight. So I welcome all of you. Something that I wanted to talk about for a brief minute. Last week, Brian DeBrouwer went over uniforms and proper way of wearing your uniforms, your face mask, proper way of taking everything off. Those of you that are in the Indianapolis area, one of the biggest things I think we all know with umpiring and getting started is it's pretty expensive when it comes to equipment, when it comes to uniforms. You're going to be out of pocket. Pretty good deal until you start working games. So what I want to do, I want to help those who are here online in the Indianapolis area. If you are new to umpiring, if you know somebody that wants to get started with umpiring, I have started to keep an inventory at our United headquarters here in Indianapolis. I have chest protectors, face masks, plate shoes, base shoes. I'm keeping inventory of base pants, plate pants, any type of umpiring shirts, jackets, anything that involves umpiring. And if you are willing to donate, please reach out to me. My email is derek@unitedumpires.org. I'm beginning to just take everything in, and as newcomers come along, as we get them trained up, they will have something to get themselves started and get their feet wet until they're able to work some games and make themselves some money. I know I still carry around, I still have in my closet the 2 pair of pants that was given to me from my high school assigners, Glenn Posey and Terrence Mobley, back whenever I first started several years ago. So I challenge each of you, those that are on this call, do something to give back. We all know the times that we're in with umpiring right now. Those of you that come to Grand Park, that come to Indianapolis, you know how big of a complex that we have and the volume of baseball games that we have. So getting new umpires, getting guys involved, it's a constant work each and every day, and it's going to be for years to come. But I challenge each of you to do your due diligence, and those that have extra equipment, those that has extra uniforms, reach out to me, because there are people out there that can use those things. And that's really my biggest thing on what I had tonight. So I'm going to turn it back over to Brian. Those that get an opportunity, please thank Brian for what he's doing. Brian DeBrouwer and Danny Miller, they have put in a lot of time with this workshop. So I hope that each and every one of you find something out of tonight and the next 3 weeks to come. Also, last thing, in-person training for Indianapolis at Grand Park will be at Pro X starting this coming Monday night at 9 p.m. So bring somebody out, bring a friend out with you. Even those that are going to in-person trainings in our other locations with Kansas City, Atlanta, I know Pennsylvania, New Jersey, bring somebody out with you, somebody who does not umpire, somebody who is thinking about doing it. Bring them out, let them get their feet wet, see if there's something that they want to do. Again, this is for you all. So I tell a lot of people you only get out of umpiring what you put into it. So I'm challenging all of you to put a little bit more effort into it, and let's come together as one and get the job done.
Great message, Whit. Thanks for that. Let's fire it up with our program for the evening, and we are going to start with a little message from Donnie Smith, who is going to be one of our site supervisors, kind of bouncing between Indy and Atlanta. And he's going to talk to us about getting dressed for the plate. So here we go.
All right, guys, I'm going to show you the easiest way to get dressed for the plate. Now, if I don't have a locker room, I'm going to have my undergarments already on. My compression shirt, my slides, where my cup's going to go, and then also my long sleeve tights. Now the first thing you're actually going to want to do is put on your pants before your shoes. After you have your pants on, you put on your shoes. One thing I want you to notice is what I do with the laces after I tie them. Now if you have the New Balance shoes, what you're going to want to do is after you knot them, tuck them up into this little pocket in the tongue. That'll help them put them away and they won't be flopping around while you're out working the plate. So you see I tie it, put it up. Now one thing I want you to see is the socks that I'm wearing. One foot I have long socks, one foot I have short socks. Now you should be able to clearly see the difference between the two and which one looks more professional. Next thing, after your shoes, you're going to want to put your shin guards on. You're going to pull your pants up, and the biggest thing in this is you're going to want to put the clasps on the outside for both of them. The reason being is that if they're on the inside, when your legs are together, there's a chance that they could rub against each other and then come undone, which we don't want while working the plate. Next thing after our shins, we're going to put our belt and ball bags on. Now we're always going to want to put the belt around left to right, making sure we get every single loop on our belt. Now I wear one ball bag, so I put it through my belt, don't miss the loop, through the other little hole, and then through the loop. One trick that was passed along to me was if you actually unbuckle this belt, and then when you put it through, it'll sit flatter on your pants. Now that we have our belt and ball bag on, the next thing we're going to do is put on our chest protector. One thing I see a lot of guys get wrong is that these back straps will get all twisted on your back. You see how I'm holding them out to the side, over the top, and I just clasp it in to the appropriate places. And just like that. After my chest protector, I'll take my shirt. You should not need help to put your shirt on. You should be able to put the shirt on yourself. Now when putting your shirt on, you're actually going to want to tuck your shirt into your tights or your pants stay. That'll help keep your shirt tucked in throughout the day and maintain that good looking appearance. Button up your pants. Get your belt on. Make sure your gig line is lined up. Grab your hat. Grab your mask. Ready to go work the plate.
Looking good, Donnie. Besides the one question that I'm seeing right now, if you have anything else that you want to ask about this video, please send that along. So in the meantime, Donnie, looks like Matthew Dreyer's asking, does it matter what side the ball bag goes on? What do you think about that, Donnie? You have your
It actually does matter. So if you're going to wear one ball bag, you're always going to want to put it on your right side. Even if you're a lefty, you're just going to have to get used to keeping it on your right side and working from that side. Now, if you wear two, it's obviously self-explanatory. Good question, though.
Yeah, unfortunately, umpiring is a little bit biased towards right-handed people. There's really no good reason that we signal strikes and outs with only our right hand, other than that's how it's always been done. But you're going to want to do things with your right hand, and that includes the ball bag being on the right side. So good question, Matthew. If you do want to use your left hand to get balls out of your ball bag, put two ball bags on, and you can certainly use your left hand to grab the baseballs. But you will stand out if you have one ball bag on your left side only, and you don't really want to draw attention to yourself that way. Donnie, couple questions are coming through about how many baseballs do you want to put in each side? What do you typically like to do there?
Me personally, I'll try to keep 4 to 5, depending on where I'm playing. If it's turf, dirt. If I have 2 ball bags, I'll actually carry 4 on each side with a total of 8. It's a good question.
Yeah, I'm a fan of that 4 to 5. If when I'm wearing 1, I go 5 on the right side to try to minimize the trips that the ball boy or ball girl has to make out there. So I think that's a good approach. All right, if there's nothing else about getting dressed for the plate, we'll progress on to learn what happens once we get back there. All right, we're back for week 2 of our online virtual workshop, and we're talking about plate work this time. And we're going to build plate work from its most basic foundations. What I want to start by talking about is, what's the goal of a plate stance? Well, the goal of the plate stance is to put your head in a position that you can consistently view the strike zone. We have a lot of other stuff to worry about in terms of where our feet go and how we squat. But just remember that the goal is to put your head in a good position every time. So let's come on over here and take a look at some of those elements that make up a good plate stance. A little closer. So how do we do that? Well, it starts with what we call the slot. And the slot position exists here between the catcher and the batter. And so Buzz is going to position himself in between the catcher and the batter. That slot really exists if you put your nose somewhere just off the inside corner of the plate. So let's take a look at that from the middle looking forward. So Buzz has put his nose just off the inside corner of the plate, and that gives him access to all this area in between the catcher and the batter. That is our slot position, okay, as we've defined it. Now, what else is going to go into our slot position? Let's go ahead and look at the feet of the umpire here. So we can come on over a little bit closer. So because we have a right-handed batter, that means that Buzz's left foot is going to be his slot foot. And he's going to step into position with that slot foot to get himself in that area just off the inside corner of the plate.
So I would call that good slot position. Now I'm going to do bad. Okay. Same thing.
Before we move on from our slot position segment, if you have any questions about the individual pieces of the plate work, please send them along, and we can address them as we go. I do see one question that's just popped up about getting squeezed by the batter, or we are going to talk about adjusting later on in our segment tonight. So we'll get to that, Bob. This is what a good view of the entire strike zone should be, and this would be a bad view, not in the slot. I do want to take just a moment here to talk about this next segment, which is going to be about the position of our feet. And I have heel toe here. Another acceptable way to describe this would be heel instep. The most important relationship you have is with the catcher's heels. And we're going to see that we want to put our toes on the catcher's heels. Where our back foot goes is either on our heel or sometimes on our instep. But we'll talk more about those small differences as we go here. And now we're going to start to look at his relationship with the catcher and see this heel toe. And that's going to be a phrase that we use a lot when we're talking about working the plate, is the heel toe. So Buzz's toes are on the heels of the catcher,
and his trail foot toes are on his own heels. So that's the heel toe. It's the relationship with the catcher, and it's the relationship with our own trail foot.
I've got it.
Now, the other thing that we need to build is where our head gets vertically. Where does our head get to vertically? Well, there's 3 ways that Buzz is going to lower his head. That is, he can widen or narrow his stance. So as his feet go wider, his head goes down. He also can squat down. So he's going to lower himself by squatting. And the last way that you can lower your head is with body lean. So you can lean more forward, and that lowers your head down. So that's the 3 ways that we lower our head are our stance getting wider, our squat getting lower, and our lean getting more forward. Every umpire is going to have a different combination of those elements that puts them into the position where their head gets to where they want. You've got to figure out what works best for you so that you're comfortable and in a repeatable position. And so for some people, that means squatting more or less, or leaning more or less, or having a more narrow or wider stance. You've got to figure out what works best for you. The goal of head height is to put your chin somewhere near the top of the catcher's head. Okay? Somewhere near the top of the catcher's head is the goal for our head height. So through those 3 elements, we're lowering ourselves into that position to make sure that we're near the catcher's head, the top of the catcher's head.
Okay, relax. I'm gonna go too low now.
So I am going to pause. I see a question from Christopher Krakos. Sorry if I'm saying that incorrectly. And his question is, how do you gauge distance from yourself to the catcher? The reality is, as a new umpire, when you're just figuring out kind of these steps in your plate stance, looking down at your feet is not a bad idea. Now, we do want to try to avoid doing that, during games as much as we can. So try to practice. And we are going to talk later tonight about some things that you can do at home to help ingrain the behavior, create a habit of stepping into a position that is where you want to be relative to the catcher. So that's something that we'll deal with. And I see some other questions about adjusting with the catcher. We will get to that stuff, but those are very, very good questions. So I'm happy to see that you're curious about those things. We'll press on here and talk about getting set on time.
Moving forward, we've got to talk about when we get set. So when we get set is really early in the process. We want to be set and ready prior to the ball being released by the pitcher. So as the pitcher's ready to release the ball, Buzz is going to drop, and we call this A to B. So if he starts up high, he's in his A position here, and he's going to drop quickly into the B position for himself. So he's going A to B, A to B, A to B. And we want to do that prior to the ball being released by the pitcher. prior to that ball being released. Ball, that's in.
One note about getting set. When we drop down from our A, our high position, to our B or our low position, you want to do that straight down. And so especially as you're getting comfortable with the slot and being a little bit off the inside corner of the plate, some umpires have a habit of dropping down and kind of leaning back over towards the plate. We don't want to lean back over the plate. We want to go straight down. And so as you work on this, work on getting your feet into position and then dropping straight down from A to B. Straight down.
Love, and this is all right. So one of the other elements to working the plate is tracking the ball into the glove, and this is where proper use of eyes exists for us as a plate umpire. Another way this will be described is timing. Okay, now timing is not a word that we are huge fans of as at United Umpires, because timing can be faked. Timing can be faked by things like reading the label on the glove or counting to 2. Those are all just fake things that people do that are really delaying the bad call they've already come up with. However, proper use of eyes and tracking the ball into the glove on every pitch prior to making up your mind about it being a ball or strike, that's how we create good timing through proper use of eyes. Okay? So we're just going to get some shots here of Buzz tracking this ball into the glove and see his eyes working to see that ball all the way into the glove before he's even considering making up his mind about ball or strike. So we're working on that tracking, and then eventually we can throw in a decision, tracking the ball no matter where it is in the zone all the way into the glove. Strike! And then we're making up our mind about ball or strike.
Ball.
So just to reinforce a couple points that we did make last week when it comes to signals, we really want to try to marry up our voice and our signal when we're calling strikes. It should happen at the same time. As a newer umpire, you should keep your focus forward until you get more comfortable. And then you can realize there are times when turning your head to call strikes is acceptable. But of course, we don't want to turn our head if there's the possibility of interference or something for us to officiate around the plate. And that's why we're going to keep our head forward in those situations. Unless there's any questions about any of the stuff that we've talked about so far, we will move on to some other plate work stuff. I do see a couple other things about the catcher adjusting, and that's coming up, I promise. Told you.
All right, so we've put ourselves in a good position in the slot with a full view of the strike zone. That's Buzz's goal when he gets set. But sometimes catchers move around. In fact, they almost always take some sort of preparatory movement prior to the arrival of the pitch. And that movement that they make can take away our view of the strike zone. So let's take a look at just kind of a neutral setup here, and Buzz in a good position. And now the catcher adjusts forward as he's ready to take this pitch. Buzz needs to react to that by also adjusting forward with the catcher. So let's come back around here and get kind of a point of view. Go ahead and back up for me there, Adam. Come on over here. You're going to shoot it like you're the umpire. So when we're in the slot, go ahead and get set. When we're in the slot, get down. This catcher, we can right now see the entire strike zone, but when he adjusts forward, he starts to put his body between us and especially the low outside part of that zone. So we've really got to make a decision to adjust with him when he moves forward. Go ahead and go forward so that we can retain our view of the entire strike zone. Okay, go ahead. Now, while we're going to be concerned with the catcher adjusting forward, we're not going to worry about his adjustments towards the outside part of the plate. And the reason for this is we want to stay in a safe spot, the green zone, as we would describe it. And if the catcher moves outside and we move out there with him, so go ahead and move out there, we've now put ourselves in the pathway of all those foul balls that are going to come back. Instead, Buzz is going to stay in his slot position so that he can see the entire strike zone and be safe from these balls that get fouled off and go over his shoulder. We've got to stay away from this area here because that's where we get into the danger zone. The other thing that happens when we move outside with catchers is it changes our perception of the outside corner. So if we're seeing the outside corner one way from the slot and now we move out with him, that changes the way I see this pitch, and we're going to make a different judgment on whether the ball is on or off the plate on the outside corner. So we really want to work to stay in a consistent place in that slot even when the catcher moves outside. Now, if my catcher gets back to neutral and we have a forward adjustment, Buzz is simply going to adjust forward with him. And we can see the way Buzz makes that adjustment. Go ahead and do that again. We can see the way Buzz makes that adjustment. He doesn't have to stand all the way back up. He's just making a small movement forward to get himself into a position where he can see the entire strike zone. Okay, go ahead and get back to neutral. Now, one of the other adjustments, a little further back there, one of the other adjustments we're going to have to make is when the catcher moves inside, because now he's starting to take away our view of the zone. So if Buzz gets set in the slot and now our catcher shifts inside on us, Buzz is going to have to work hard to find that tunnel that exists underneath the hitter's elbows. I got it. So if the hitter is set here, we can see the way Buzz has found that area between the catcher's shoulder and under the hitter's elbow to see into the strike zone. If he stays back and behind the catcher here, he's not going to see the ball all the way through its flight into the strike zone. So he's got to work hard to find that tunnel that's somewhere between the catcher and the hitter. So that's an adjustment that we will make as a plate umpire when the catcher comes inside.
Okay, reset. Good, same thing.
So when it comes to adjusting, think of that PVC pipe strike zone that we just had as a demonstration. And you want to almost have an imaginary glowing box that exists out there over top of the plate. And if you recognize that you're not able to see that box, all parts of that box, we need to make some sort of adjustment.
Brian, I see one here. What about batters who crowd the plate? Do we want to move further outside, or how do we stay in the slot in that situation?
Yeah, and I would kind of describe this visual right here as a batter crowding the plate and a catcher coming inside. So we kind of have both of those elements. And this is where we're looking for that tunnel that exists underneath the hitter's elbow and gives us access to this entire strike zone. You don't want to move more over the plate than your starting position. So if we went back to our original slot view, we never want to adjust more over the plate than that, because that's what puts us in danger. The reality is when batters swing at pitches and foul them straight back, those are often fouled back over the plate because that's where the ball was pitched. And so if you move over the plate, you are putting yourself in the danger zone. So our adjustments are going to be forward with the catcher or down and in underneath the hitter's elbows to try to find that tunnel into seeing the strike zone. One of the best metaphors that I've heard about the slot, because we have a lot of new umpires or newish umpires on these calls. And you've probably sat in dugouts and said, why is the umpire so far inside? It's a valid question from a player's perspective. The answer, like we've talked about, is it keeps you safer. We need umpires to be safe and stay in games, and this is the way to do that. So how do you see the outside corner when you move in like that, when you're somewhere off the inside corner of the plate?
Exactly.
Well,
The
answer is, just like you drive a car your whole life, right? I'm sitting on the driver's side of the car. I can't see where the front passenger side of my car is exactly in space. But you know what happens? After enough time driving, you start to get comfortable where that passenger side front bumper of your car is in space. That's what happens with the plate. You start to learn where the outside corner is, even though you're viewing that from a slight angle. And the proof of this is there are many umpires who define the outside corner very well from a slot position. I promise you it's possible. It just takes a little time. And if there are no additional questions, we will move forward. And we're going to talk about some things you can do at home, because the reality is we've got to practice. So how do we do that? Throw it to Nobu.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Nobu here for United Umpires. We got Derek Whitfield behind the camera. And today, really briefly, I'm going to show you how you can get plate reps in the comfort of your own home. No gear, no uniform necessary. All you need is a little bit of tape down on a hardwood floor and something to pretend as your catcher. I remember doing this almost every night at umpire school, making sure I got the necessary reps so that I was ready when I was on the field. So the purpose of having the tape down is to keep track of your heel instep and where you're at in the slot. And this will let you simulate what it's like in a game as you're working through your plate work. So all you have to do is pretend you're stepping back, step in, make sure your feet are right, get down in your plate stance, pretend there's a pitch coming in, track it with your eyes, and if you want, you can even add a mechanic. Do that for a batter, switch sides, make him a lefty, and same exact concept. Step in, get down in your stance, track a pitch, ball! Make sure you're stepping out, make sure you're staying in the same rhythm as you would be when you're working a real game. That's how easy it is. You can do it in the comfort of your own home, so there's really no excuse not to do it. Guys, the season's coming quick. Come springtime, all these fields are going to have baseball games played, and we're going to need umpires at the top of their game. So make sure we're putting in the necessary work in the off season so that we're ready come springtime. Back to you, Brian. Stepping out, make sure you're staying.
So I do want to point out, because this is the difference in what I mentioned earlier, and that is the heel toe versus the heel instep. The most important relationship we have is to the catcher. So getting our slot foot forward onto the catcher's heels is goal number one. Everyone's body is slightly different. And so the reason our trail foot, or Nobu's left foot in this circumstance, this one right here, is going to be dropped back either onto the heel or the instep of our front foot, is to give that knee, that trail leg knee, space so that it doesn't hit the catcher in the back. Because if our feet are even and we bend our knees, that knee is going to hit the catcher in the back repeatedly. And that's not something we want to do. So whether your own feet are in a heel toe or heel instep relationship will be more of a question for you personally and how your own body moves. But we want to get that front foot all the way up onto the catcher's heels, and then our trail foot drops back so that the catcher has space to do their thing. And these are the United facilities. Get a little look behind the scenes.
Thanks, Nobu. So a couple other drills that we can use at home to work on some of those plate fundamentals that we've been talking about. This would just be some tape on a mirror, and what we're going to work on is getting our feet into position so we can really put that line of tape on the floor right in front of the mirror. So we step in, like Nobu talked about, and now we drop down A to B, and we're looking to just kind of use our reflection and that line of tape to get a consistent head height. So we're working on dropping ourselves into position so that the top of our head is hitting that tape. And so we're finding that consistent spot. And we want to be locked in when we get to that point. So we're going A to B, making sure that we're nice and still. We can use our hand on our leg there if we want to reinforce being set. Another thing we can do, we can take a ball of socks and we can lay on the ground, is toss this ball of socks up in the air and work on tracking it into our hand with just our eyes. And so what you want to try to feel yourself doing is avoiding moving your head to see this this ball of socks coming down, and really just use your eyes to make sure that we're properly using our eyes to track the pitch into the glove every time. We don't want to be chasing pitches with our head. And we also don't want to be getting lazy where we kind of stop seeing the ball before it gets to the hand. We want to track it all the way into the hand, and we toss it back up again and work on it on different sides. So some people will have deficiencies tracking pitches on one side versus the other. So you really want to toss this thing up in multiple different positions so that you can make sure that your tracking is solid on all parts of the zone. Have at it.
All right. I do see a question about check swings, which is our next video. So that's well timed. And if there's nothing else about plate stances for now, we will move on and talk about check swings and strike zones. So if you've got anything, speak now. All right, let's talk about check swings.
All right, we're going to talk about check swings here. Check swings. So we talked about some of the mechanics of check swings last week, but let's talk about the judgment process of that moving forward here. So Buzz is working the plate, and he has a pitch that's very close to the strike zone and a check swing. What we want to do as the plate umpire is to stay focused on this pitch. So if the pitch is close to the strike zone, we've got to stay focused on that pitch, which means we might miss a check swing in those situations as a plate umpire. Now, if Buzz can identify that this pitch is going to be in the dirt, way out of the strike zone, his focus can now shift from that pitch that's clearly not a strike, and he can start to pick up what's going on with this bat. And what I want to show you from this angle behind is just how easily we can see as the plate umpire where this bat gets to. So this perspective of the front line of home plate and the bat in space above home plate is a very good barometer for us to say that's a swing. As soon as the bat gets even with or past the front edge of home plate, that's when we really want to say this is a swing. Okay, so as the plate umpire, you can use that guide to help you make a decision about whether they went around or not. Now, of course, that's if we have the opportunity to see the swing part of this because the pitch is not close. If the pitch is close, we stay with the pitch. Okay? So we can come back out front and we see Buzz is going to say, yes, this is a swing. We can review that. We're going to use our slot arm, our same side arm to call that. If we turn this around and we have a left-handed hitter and we have a swing here, Buzz is going to say, yes, he went. Yes, with that slot arm. So we're always using the slot arm to say yes. Now, if we have to appeal this, okay, what we don't want to do is wait too long. We want to appeal this as soon as we know that it's a close decision. So let's take a look at the timing of an appeal in this situation.
Ball no. Norm, did he go?
Yes, he did. Okay, good. Buzz hasn't waited too long for the defense to say, get help. He said, this was close, and I want to see what my partner has, so let's ask him that question right away. We got to get into that process so that we can get that answer.
You want to redo that one with a right-hander since we're...
Sure.
Good for the answer. Ball no. Norm, did he go?
Yes, he did. Okay, good. Just keep doing that a couple times.
Ball no. Did he go?
No. Okay, so it's important to note that no matter the position of our base umpire, whether it's the A position at first base, the B or C position inside, Buzz can ask that question, okay? And sometimes what we might have is a left-handed batter in the box and a question that gets asked to the first base umpire. And this is certainly not a great position as the first base umpire to see whether he went on a close check swing. But on an obvious check swing, you can help your partner as the first base umpire. So if Buzz, let's say, gets blocked out by the catcher moving up and in and doesn't see an obvious check swing.
Ball no. Did he go?
Yes, he did. We can get that correct. So even though our umpire down the first base line is not in a great position to see a close check swing, when it's obvious and we get blocked out as the plate umpire, that first base umpire can save us and the crew can get the call right. All right, so let's talk about judgment on check swings and how we decide when the batter goes around. So we talked about that from the plate umpire's perspective and being able to see down into the bat as it relates to the front of the plate. But that's very difficult to do as the base umpire. So we're not going to see exactly where the barrel finishes as the base umpire. What we can see is the entire action of the batter. What does the batter do with his body to swing this bat through space? So there's really three pieces to any swing. It's hips, torso, and hands. As we combine movement on each of those planes, we start to get closer to a swing. So as the base umpire, what's important here is not to watch the flight of the ball and then pick up the bat at the last second. Rather, watch the batter the entire time the ball is traveling to the plate so that we can see opening of the hips, movement of the hands, and this, which is really a close check swing, becomes a very easy call because we see exactly what they're doing with their entire body, not just where the barrel finishes. So there's really two different kinds of check swings that we're going to see. We're going to see the early commitment check swing where they think they're getting a fastball and they end up getting an off-speed pitch and their hips are open and all we need is just a little movement from the barrel there. A little movement and that bat has gotten out in front of my body and that means it's a swing. The other type of check swing we see is the late protection, okay? So I've got 2 strikes and I'm thinking about trying to foul something off and at the last second I realize that that ball is out of the zone. So I'm here and now my hands are gonna go. At this point, I need to flip that barrel pretty significantly out in front to be swinging at the pitch. So if my hands stay middle of the body, this is not a swing. As my hands get out in front a little bit more, that becomes a swing. So take in the entirety of what the batter's doing, not just trying to figure out where this bat finishes.
Bend over on the ground right side.
I think this is our first lefty of the game. So now for the first time I have check swing responsibilities. So really, I like to get my focus onto the hitter kind of as the pitcher releases the ball. So I'm watching the pitcher to make sure everything's legal with his delivery. He releases it, I'm getting to the hitter. And rather than tracking the ball into the zone and then seeing what the hitter does with the bat and having it kind of surprise you, I think getting your eyes to the hitter early will have you be ready to see what he's going to do with the bat. It's kind of the same idea as plays at first base. So rather than reading a true throw across the infield, I think getting your eyes to the first baseman early will keep that play from blowing up on you. Similar idea here. If I get my eyes to the hitter early, his check swing won't blow up on me. It won't surprise me. Another thing in terms of checking the outfielders, once we get to 2 strikes in the count, sometimes they'll shift around a little bit just because the hitter might be a bit more defensive. So I like to see if they're going to adjust maybe more to the opposite field side. Strike 3. See ya. Seeing what the hitter does with.
Okay. Little bonus footage there. Nice strike 3 call by Eric Slosik from the Maryland, Virginia area. And I do see a number of questions that I want to address. So let's go through that. And we'll just go in reverse order here. If we have a 2-man crew or a 3-man crew, would it be smart to ask your partner, even if you think you know the correct decision? Luke Russell with the question of the night right there. One of my least favorite bits of advice to umpires is that the plate umpire shouldn't call check swings. Okay. If you do things correctly as the plate umpire, if you identify that the pitch is in the dirt and you move your eyes to the bat, you have the best view in the stadium of the check swing. Okay. Once you get more comfortable on the field, you are going to find that you have a very good look at check swings. Now, what we can't do is make a bad guess on a check swing as the plate umpire. If you're not sure, that's when we ask. But the way I would frame this answer is, if I know a hitter swung and decide not to call it myself and ask my partner, did this hitter swing? And they say no, we have knowingly influenced the game by making an incorrect call. And that's not the job of umpiring. So does it take some courage to make a close check swing call? Absolutely. But that's why we're out there. So don't be afraid to call a check swing, even if it's close, when you see it very well. Okay, moving backwards. Peaches asks, I thought the new check swing approach was the swing past the body of the batter and not necessarily plate related. Peaches, you are correct. And what we're talking about in terms of the plate is using that to help us. So as this bat gets parallel with the front of the plate and then moves past the front of the plate, we can also say that it's moving past the body. So we're not saying that the plate is our judgment point. We're using that to help us by seeing down through the bat as it relates to the front of the plate. Once the bat passes parallel to the front of the plate, it's also past the body. We had a question about calling check swings on third strikes with a close pitch. And I'm just going to summarize that we're asking about the difficulty of making a pitch and check swing decision. This is one of the hardest things that we deal with as plate umpires, seeing a close pitch and a check swing. And what you have to convince yourself of is, I need to focus on the pitch. The pitch is my first and most important responsibility, because nobody can help me with the pitch. I can't appeal to my partner that I missed the pitch. That's not how it works. I can appeal to my partner that I missed the check swing. So do your best to get the pitch correct. Use your proper use of eyes to help you, even if you get distracted by the bat for just a moment, and try as hard as you can to get that pitch correct. Now, one thing to add to this whole check swing issue, because I saw something that led me to believe there might be some confusion, is this very important phrase: check swing strikes are not appealable. Everyone say it with me. You don't have to unmute yourself, but say it with me. Check swing strikes are not appealable. If I say, yes, that's a swing on a check swing, we can't appeal that call. It's done. I've made the decision that it's a swing. No changing of the mind there. So we are only asking our partner for help when we say ball, no swing. Now we ask our partner for help. Let's say it one more time just to make sure that it really sticks. Check swing strikes are not appealable. All right, we've got a couple more questions down here.
It's not appealable.
What's the verbal call at the plate if you deem that they went? And that is simply, yes, he went. Yes, he went. What hand do you use to ask your partner? Chris asks that question. Go back and watch last week's video where we do talk about the mechanics of asking our partner. It doesn't really matter which hand you use to ask your partner, because by the time we're asking our partner, all of the activity around the plate should have ceased. So we're not so worried about blocking our vision with our arm when we ask our partner. What is important when you ask your partner is making sure that it's clear that we're asking them versus saying, yes, that's a swing. Thomas asks, will you talk about a 2-umpire crew with the base umpire on the first base line and a check swing with a left-handed batter? I did talk about that. And I certainly agree that if it's close, it's much harder for the first base umpire to see. However, when they obviously swing and our plate umpire misses the call, we are not going to pass on a check swing just because we don't have the best view of it from first base when it's a left-handed hitter. We're not going to pass on those just because someone's not going to like the call. John asks about a check swing in the dirt on strike 3. We're going to deal with uncaught third strikes next week. We'll talk about all the mechanics of uncaught third strikes next week, but very good question. Man, check swings just really get the crowd going. Everybody loves to talk about check swings. Here's the final note on check swings. There's a reason check swings are difficult and check swing situations are difficult. It's because we've added a secondary level of decisions. Okay. And if you want to talk about being a very good baseball umpire, just about everybody can make one decision. Most people can make one. Most people. When you add that second decision, it starts to separate people. The best way that you can make that second decision well is proper use of eyes. Okay. Slow down, respond to the things that are happening on the field rather than just reacting and jumping at calls. Slow yourself down and almost think of yourself as just a casual observer of the game who happens to be making decisions about it as well. But that's a difficult task, making that second and sometimes even third decision in a quick sequence. And that's really what separates the average from the good, from the great umpires. Eladio asks, on a check swing and you determine they went and the ball hits the batter, it is still a strike. And yes, Newton is all over the proper terminology, which is a dead ball strike. It is a strike. And because the ball hit the batter, the ball is no longer in play. Dead ball strike. Okay, we're going to pause for just a moment here on our videos. And we're going to move over, I don't know what that is, to this stuff. I have something on my screen that I don't really want there. So I'm going to try to get rid of that before we move on. Look at that. Figured it out. Talk about making that second decision. Okay, so now we're moving on to some discussion about the strike zone. Okay, some discussion about the strike zone. We're going to start by really addressing the new umpire and building a strike zone. And really, as a new umpire, the single biggest challenge that you're going to face is building a consistent, believable strike zone. Calling balls and strikes might be the most difficult thing to do in sports officiating, but I promise you that it does get easier. The reality is there's no substitute for seeing pitches and taking the time to reinforce the habits that will give you success when it comes to defining the strike zone. Here are a couple pieces of general advice that I think are going to help you. Each game, I want you to try to reduce the number of times that you call a pitch and immediately wish you'd made the opposite call. So you make a call and you immediately say, oh, I missed that one. This will be done by continually reinforcing proper use of eyes. Proper use of eyes is the key here. Another thing that we want to try to do is to do our best to reduce the number of times that you make a call because of an outside influence. And that would be things such as makeup calls, being afraid of people yelling at you, wanting to exact revenge because someone yelled at you. And the way that I want to describe this is with the rope metaphor. And I have to credit this to Kurt Widener, who works for and instructs with one of our partner organizations, Tri-State Elite Umpires out in New Jersey. This is a great metaphor, and I heard it for the first time the other day. And that is, we are in the middle of the playing field as the plate umpire. And each side, each dugout has a rope attached to you. And they're going to pull you in their direction if you let them. What we need to do is to cut those ropes so that we are not being influenced by either side. Now, the key is to cut those ropes and still be likable. Some people cut those ropes and they're not so likable when they do it. But we're going to talk about strategies to do that stuff later on in our clinic series. Another piece of advice that I would give new and really experienced umpires is to seek out feedback from reliable sources. Our partners should be giving us both general and specific advice, saying things like, I think you called a wide but consistent zone, and here were the few pitches that I disagreed with you at the bottom of the strike zone. And if they don't give you that information, work hard to pull it out of them. Ask them about specific pitches or parts of the zone. We can also sometimes use catchers to help us. When they give you bad body language after a call, we can say something like, did you think that was there? Did you think that was a strike? And if they say it was close, then that probably means you got it correct. If they say, yes, that was definitely a strike, then maybe think about the fact that you missed it. Video is another great resource for feedback. Everyone has a smartphone these days. Clear out your memory, get plenty of space on that thing so that you can set it up behind and to the side of you when you work the plate, and record a game and go back and say, here are the 5 or 10 pitches that I'm not so sure of. Let's see what the video looks like. That feedback is the best thing you can do for yourself as an umpire. Seek out video. And another piece of general advice is when it comes to the top and bottom of the strike zone, explore them by calling strikes, not balls. And eventually, you're going to call a strike at the bottom or the top of the zone, and the entire dugout is going to lose their mind. And that's when you know you went a little too low or a little too high, and we make a small adjustment. But what you don't want to do is call a bunch of balls up and down and never figure out where the strike zone actually ends. Call strikes to figure out the top and bottom of the strike zone. So let's move on to a little bit of a discussion about the modern strike zone. What do I mean when I say the modern strike zone? Well, as video and TrackMan increase their presence in amateur baseball, the expectation of the strike zone changes as well. And we have moved away from the wide ranch house strike zone, and we've moved towards the tall townhouse strike zone. Tight and tall has replaced wide and short. Now, when we talk about the modern strike zone, nowhere in this advice are we saying to not call strikes. What we are saying is that you should call as many strikes as you can inside of your zone and nothing outside of your zone. Be as aggressive as you can inside your zone. So let's talk about some of the things that lead us to miss pitches inside of our defined strike zone. First one, a missed spot. When the catcher is set up away and the pitcher throws a pitch inside, and that because they missed their spot, we often call that pitch a ball. Don't do that. If it's in your box, call it a strike. Another reason we miss strikes is pitches in the same at-bat that challenge opposite parts of the zone. So we see a pitch that's at the top of the strike zone and we call it a strike. And then the very next pitch is at the bottom of the strike zone. It can be difficult because of how far apart those two pitches are to call them both strikes. But you need to trust your radar and be aggressive inside of your defined zone. Call them both strikes. Another reason we miss strikes is, like we talked about earlier, distraction from check swings. There is a natural inclination to blink when the batter flashes their bat in front of your face. Fight that instinct. It's not easy. Everyone still does it from time to time. This is where your proper use of eyes can come into play. Even if you blink momentarily, if you use your eyes properly and you have good slow timing, you can still make up for that by seeing the pitch as it finishes into the catcher's glove. Another thing that we do is we squeeze the zone when the catcher is hitting. And this old school mentality was to protect the catcher. And this is a really good way to get yourself in trouble when it comes to the modern strike zone. We're not going to call bad pitches on anyone, let alone our catcher. What you can't do is see a pitch that would be a strike for everyone else on the field and call it a ball just because it's the catcher hitting. Now, last but not least, one of the reasons we miss pitches inside our zone is poor presentation. And here's the one time we might actually call a strike a ball. So a pitch that is inside the strike zone, but we call it a ball because of this poor presentation. So let's talk about that, and then we're going to look at some video. What I like to consider is how good is the pitch and how bad is the reception. So if the pitch is down the middle, I don't need much from the catcher in order for me to call it a strike. In fact, sometimes they don't even catch the ball, but if it's a middle pitch, I'm calling that thing a strike almost every time. Now, as the pitch starts to approach the boundaries of the strike zone, we need more presentation from that catcher. What we don't want to do is erode our credibility by calling a pitch that no one believes is a strike. That's not the approach we want to take. So what we're going to see here is a pitch that misses its spot by a good foot at least. But as we can see, the pitch is inside the box and it's received well, right? That glove doesn't continue to go down with the ball. Therefore, it's a strike. Another thing we can note here, let's take a look at the umpire's positioning behind the plate. What's he working hard to do? Find that tunnel underneath the hitter's elbows so that he can see this pitch all the way through into the glove and decide correctly that it's a strike. Another pitch where we're set up inside and it comes away, but because this pitch touches the zone and it's received well enough, our man Phil Cuzzy back there gets it correct and calls it a strike. Now, I wouldn't recommend this positioning, but different strokes, right? This would be that dangerous spot that we're going to get hit by foul balls, but it happens. All right, now let's look at a pitch that's actually in the zone, but
his dad was a .330 hitter over 4 years. And then later on,
this pitch is in the strike zone, above the knee.
His dad was a .330 hitter over 4 years.
With the catcher
and then later on,
wiping that glove away towards the hitter, that our umpire goes ahead and calls.
His dad was a .330 hitter over 4 years.
Fun fact: this is the first
and then later on,
called pitch of the game. Everything prior to this point was either fouled off or put in play.
His dad was a .330 hitter over 4 years.
And knows it's a strike.
And then later on,
says, I'm not going to start my day with a pitch that no one believes is a strike. Okay. We don't want to erode our credibility by calling.
Before his dad was a 330 hitter over 4 years. And then later on,
is important. I promise we're going to get to all of these questions, but I do want to just continue on here for a few moments. So why then do we miss pitches outside of our defined zone? We talked about not missing anything inside of our box. Why do we miss pitches that are outside of our box? Well, bad umpiring advice like strikes and outs or find a strike to start the inning. And this is advice that I got myself as a new umpire, even in professional baseball. Find a strike to start the inning, call strikes, call outs. This was good advice back in the days of umpiring for the dugout. But as we talked about last week, we're not umpiring for the dugout anymore. We're umpiring for the cameras. And the camera doesn't like us to find strikes to start the inning. Another reason that we miss pitches outside of our zone is back-to-back borderline pitches. So we see a pitch that's just off the plate inside. The next pitch is just off the plate outside. We're much more likely to give in and call that second pitch a strike because we don't want people to get mad at us. Be stubborn and stick to your zone. That's how you're going to be consistent. Pitchers that slowly work back towards the plate, if they throw the first pitch and it's 3 balls off the plate and the second pitch is 2 balls off the plate, that's a pitch that almost no one would call a strike. But because it looks better than the first one, that's when we give in a little bit. So understand that just because the second pitch might be better than the first one, it needs to be in the strike zone for us to go ahead and call it. And kind of the similar thing here, but helping a pitcher that is struggling. We know that a pitcher is having a hard time hitting the zone, and so we're going to go ahead and find a strike. And the phrase that I like to think of is let them struggle. Okay, it's their job to throw the ball in the strike zone, not our job to help them. We want to keep the game fair. Best way to do that is to stick to our zone. Stick to our zone. So let's visualize some of the things that we've been talking about here. Here's the reality of strike zones. Everyone walks onto the field with our individual idea of what the strike zone is for that day. For each of us, that green box, my strike zone, is a little bit different. And it might be different from day to day based on the game that you're working. But that's our zone. That's what we walk on the field with. What we also walk on the field with, and it's, again, individual for each person, is a certain margin of error, both inside of and outside of that box as we see it. We are not perfect. We're going to miss pitches. Even if you shut out all the outside influences, you are going to miss pitches within your margin of error. Now, some people have a better margin of error than others because of training or consistency, but this is what we bring to the table as umpires, our zone and our margin of error. Now, what we also sometimes bring is these misses outside of the margin of error. If you let outside influences into your strike zone, you end up polluting your consistency and getting yelled at. This is what we're trying to avoid. Keep these misses outside of our zone away from your game. Call your zone, be stubborn, stick to it. Don't have misses that pop up and pollute your consistency. Now, just to reinforce, the green is our zone. You can improve your idea of the strike zone with feedback, video, partners, catchers, and eventually TrackMan. If you work on games with TrackMan, you're going to get a good bit of feedback about what your zone actually looks like. The yellow, again, is our margin of error. And this can be improved with consistency of mechanics, making sure that we get our head into a good position to see the pitch each time. And the red are those outside influences. That's what we can improve by being aware of those outside influences and being stubborn enough to keep them out of our game. Okay, let's talk about some strike zone terminology. And really, we want to try to be specific when we're talking to batters and catchers about where pitches are located. We also might want to use location descriptions when calling balls, especially in and out, to help teams understand our zone. So let's look at a visual representation of this. If I call a pitch that is right here, we want to describe that as at the top. However, when I call a pitch that's a little bit lower than that, and the hitter asks, is that the top? We can't say to that hitter, yes, that's the top, because now we're giving them bad information. We want to tell them there's more up there. Same thing with pitches that are not quite on the corner. We want to tell them, nope, that's inner third. Now it's on the corner. Don't give bad information just because we're lazy. We want to try to be as specific as we can when it comes to our terminology. So now let's imagine in the top of an inning, we call a pitch a strike right there. That green dot, we've called it a strike. And now we roll around to the bottom of the inning and we call this pitch a ball. So we call the first one a strike and everyone says, oh, he's going to call the high strike today. Then we go to the bottom half of the inning. We call that pitch a ball and people are confused, right? Because they just saw us call a pitch that's similar, a strike. How can we alleviate that confusion? Very simply. Ball, that's outside. Ball, that's outside. Same thing when we're dealing with the lower part of the zone or inside here. So we call a strike, and then we call that a ball. We want to say, whoop, that should say ball, that's inside. Sorry for the editing. What this does is it helps people from the sides understand where our zone is. And rather than them thinking that we're being inconsistent, we're helping them to see, yes, I'm going to call the high pitch, but I'm not going to go off the plate. And that's where I had the second one. So use ball that's outside and ball that's inside to help people understand your strike zone. I did see a question pop up. I'm going to address it right now. And that is, how loud? I want the dugouts to hear me say that's outside or that's inside. Loud enough for the dugouts to hear, especially at the start of the game. When the game is just getting going and I'm establishing my zone, I want people to know that. Now, as we progress on, it might get a little bit softer so that just the catcher can hear me. Because now I can just use the catcher to deal with the dugouts. And when I say ball, that's outside, and they look at the catcher, he's just going to wave and say, yeah, he had it out. And that's a good transition to talk about dealing with catchers. Okay, dealing with catchers. We have to train our catcher to understand our strike zone. Think of this like training a dog. You have to be consistent. If you let your dog think that getting on the couch is acceptable, they're going to be confused later when you don't let them on the couch. Catchers are the same. If you give catchers bad information by going looking for strikes to start an inning, it's going to be harder for them to believe you when later you call a similar pitch a ball just because there's 2 strikes. We need to be consistent across all pitches to help reinforce where our zone is to these catchers. This can also be done with the use of that specific language. Tell catchers where you have pitches so that they start to understand where your zone exists. Now, another thing we have to talk about in terms of catching is this modern trend in catching to pull everything, because the big leaguers are doing it, college kids are doing it. That means that it's going to work its way down and everyone's going to do it. Now, why is this happening? Why are they pulling everything? Because the data proves that it works at the major league level. At the major league level, catchers who move the glove get more borderline called strikes than catchers who don't. Now, what catchers have realized is that they can't stick a strike and pull a ball, or else the umpire is just going to know, oh, he moved the glove, it must have been a ball. What they are doing now is they're moving the strikes and the balls so that everything looks the same. That's the modern approach to catching.
So to me, that's what a good receiver was. And then I really started watching some of the guys who were really good at the game, you know, Hedges and Flowers and guys like that.
All of them are going to get,
you know, I was just, it kind of irritated me because, like, why do these guys get so many calls? Why are they so good? And I really dove into it and dove into the numbers. And
now, what we have to do.
So to me, that's what a good receiver was. And then I really started watching some of the guys who were really good at the game, you know, Hedges and Flowers and guys like that. And, you know, I was just, it kind of irritated me because, like, why do these guys get so many calls? Why are they so good? And I really dove into it and dove into the numbers. And
we can't let this influence us either into or out of.
So to me, that's what a good receiver was. And then
Okay, last bit about strike zones, because I can't go through all that and then not say something like there are situations where the competitive nature of the game is compromised. There are certainly situations when the competitive nature of the game is compromised, and then we should manage the game by calling strikes. Okay, that's when we should manage the game by calling strikes. We just can't start the day by thinking about finding strikes, or that's when we quickly go outside of our zone and erode our credibility. I'm seeing a couple messages in the box about hearing me during the videos. I'm sorry about that. I'll try to make that better for next week. But the point about the catchers moving pitches is we're going to have to figure out a way to deal with that. We can't tell catchers to stop pulling pitches. It's not our job to tell catchers how to receive the ball. It's our job to call the zone. So get comfortable with dealing with catchers moving pitches, because it's not going to go away anytime soon. Okay, let's address some of these questions here. I hope my audio is back to being acceptable. Somebody give me a thumbs up over there if it is. All right, thank you. Okay, so looking at some of these strike zone questions. Man, we got a lot in there. Check swings and strike zones gets the people going. If a ball passes through the strike zone and you have a check swing also, what do you call the strike or the check swing? You should always call the pitch first. So if the pitch is in the zone, it's a called strike. We want to call the pitch first.
Ryan, I see a question in here that is pretty interesting for me from Chris Torres. He says, is it more important to perfect the strike zone or consistency more important, at least for beginning umpires? So can you kind of talk with him on, talk with everybody about what is more important, consistent strike zone or consistency with your pitches?
So I assume what you're talking about is kind of calling a perfect box versus being more consistent. And certainly, especially as a new umpire, you're searching for consistency. And your goal shouldn't be to call a perfect box. One of the funny things about baseball is that everyone uses the same plate. So major leaguers, all the way down to 6-year-olds, they use the same plate. There's no other sport where the best players use the same equipment as the lowest level players. It's always a different size field or whatever. So the reality is we shouldn't call exactly the same strike zone that they call in the major leagues as a 10-year-old or 12-year-old or, a younger level umpire. We should seek to be consistent and fair in what we're calling more than perfectly accurate to the book. I hope that addresses kind of the general idea of that question. Whoever asked that, if you have an additional concern there, please feel free to put it in the box. Eric Myrtle asks about low and away strikes. Both benches disagreed. And his partner came up to him and said, dude, you got to call that pitch. You're missing it and pissing people off. Hard to hear from your son, but good feedback from your partner. I agree 100% with that. And kudos to him for not being afraid to tell dad. Jacob Perkins asks about the by the book strike zone. Kind of just addressed that with the prior question. Not by the book, but certainly consistent. And notice when I talked about strike zones with that graphic, it wasn't by the book. Everybody walks out there onto the field with a different idea of the zone. The most important thing to do is stick with that idea of the zone. Don't go outside of your strike zone for those outside influences. And Luke Russell asks about if my strike zone starts to fluctuate, how do I get back to my original strike zone without making it known that my zone is fluctuating? Everyone's going to miss pitches. Everyone's going to miss them. That's part of the mental toughness that it takes to be a good umpire. Do you respond to missing pitches by adding on more missed pitches in an effort to try to make up? Or do you get yourself back on track and call your zone? There's no easy way to deal with a zone that's fluctuating, other than maybe saying something to the catcher, like, hey, you know what? I probably should have called that a strike. I'll do better next time, or I'll take a better look at that next time. That kind of puts it out there that you're not feeling great about what you just called. And so then when they go back to the dugout, they're going to say, yeah, he said he missed that one. That allows us almost a little bit of a buffer zone to say, okay, he missed that one. Now he's going to get back on track. So it's not a bad idea to be honest with catchers sometimes. Best time to be honest with a catcher right after they get that guy out. So if you miss a pitch in an at-bat, you're really hoping that he grounds out to the shortstop so that when you come back there, you can say, hey, that 1-2 pitch, I probably should have got that one. It's a lot easier to do that after they get the guy out than after he hits a home run. So somebody asked about TrackMan. You do not access it. That's not something that you're going to have for yourself. That's something that's going to be in the stadiums that you work in as you move to higher levels of baseball. And what else we got in there? Oh, Philip Kane. So Phil, I don't mean to pick on you, but I tell catchers that pull the ball. You knew it was a ball. That's why you pulled it. Again, that's kind of the older approach to catching, where it was stick strikes and pull balls. That's not how catchers catch pitches anymore. They're going to move everything. The problem is major league catchers are really good at it. They pick their spots well. Their hands are much smoother. So what works at the big league level they're going to try it at the amateur level, and it's not necessarily going to be as effective. But guess what? We're still going to have to deal with it. So you can't say to people, don't pull the ball, because that's what they're going to do. That's their approach these days. And we've got to deal with it. So would the outside part of the zone be considered part of the ball hitting the corner? Yes. If any part of the ball touches any part of the zone, then it is a strike. So if in a perfect world, if you had some sort of radar and you could see exactly where the edge of the ball finished, if the edge of the ball touched the edge of the zone, that is a strike. Rich asks about the modern strike zone. Are we retraining batters and coaches with the upper corners? I'm not exactly sure what you mean by retraining, but yeah, they might be seeing some pitches that they haven't been used to in the past. What's most important is be consistent. If you're going to call the high strike, then try to call it early and often. Couple more questions in here. What else we got? Man, they just keep pouring in. I love it. Keep it coming. This is what we want. Curious. I know we don't want to do this, but do you think most catchers or coaches will expect a makeup call if you tell them you missed the call? No. I mean, they might want it, but the reality is we've got to move on to the next pitch. And they might say something like, you owe us one. And I'm going to find a quiet moment to tell them, hey, I might miss one, but I'm not going to miss the next one to make up. I'm going to get the next one right. And in the long run, that's what's going to make people want you to umpire their games. They want people who can be mentally tough and not swayed by that rope effect of being pulled in different directions. What about the new technique of catching down to up? Yeah, Eric, that's exactly what we're talking about. The catchers who are going to funnel stuff up and try to make it look better. The onus is on us as umpires to define where the strike zone is. I'm going to go ahead and ask people, if you don't have a question that you want me to answer, stop sending messages into the box. Okay. I appreciate people chiming in, but you're going to make it much more difficult for us to address these things. So, last strike zone question we got here is, do you ever find yourself in a situation where you just can't see the pitcher's release, no matter how low? Absolutely, Dan. And that's a perfect question to end on. Because if we are so squeezed by the catcher and the batter that we have to pick either seeing the zone or the release, which one should we pick? We should pick the zone, right? That's what we need. That's where we need to see the ball. We want to see the ball out of the hand. That helps us to track it all the way. But if we have to make a choice about which one to see or not see, then we're always going to choose to see the zone rather than the release. All right. That was a good segment. I'll go back through those questions, and if there is anything to address next week, we'll certainly do that. We are now going to move on to a very brief discussion about system mechanics. So the basics of how the two umpire system works. And we start by talking about starting positions. And this is our A position. So when we say A position, we mean the base umpire positioned on the foul line behind the first baseman with their foot adjacent to the foul line. Okay, that's our A position. And we're going to move around a little bit based on the starting position of the first baseman. And what I like to think about here is there's a circle that exists around this first baseman. And that circle is how quickly he can move in a direction to go field a batted ball, I've got to stay outside of that circle so that I don't interfere with this first baseman's opportunity to field that ball. So as they come closer to the line, more of that circle is interacting with the line, and I'm going to give them a little more space. Now, as they move away from the line, less of that circle is starting to interact with the line, and now I can move forward. I always want to try really hard to be able to see the front of the first baseman's glove, because I want to be able to see a line drive that either bounces right in front of their glove or that they catch in the webbing of their glove. So we can't get so far behind the first baseman that we can't see the front of their glove. That's our goal. Now we have the B position. So the B position is this position on the first base side of the infield. If you draw a line from the edge of the plate through the edge of the mound, that line should go right through your feet. You should also be halfway between second base and the pitcher's rubber. Okay, halfway between second base and the pitcher's rubber. The common mistake that we see from a lot of umpires is starting far too deep in this B position. So in the 2-umpire system, we really want to be forward in the B position. We also are going to be square to the plate. Square to the plate. Nick, good question about moving. If a fielder asks, yes, if the second baseman or shortstop asks you to move, then one step to the left or right is entirely appropriate. We don't want to be in their way. So a small adjustment there is fine. This is our C position. Our C position, that same line that runs through the edge of the mound, goes through our legs. And again, we want to be halfway between second base and second base and the pitcher's rubber. Let's talk about the different situations that we go to the B position. That would be with a runner on first base only. Also with a runner on first and third, we go to the B position. And we go to the C position with runners on first and second, and runners on second and third, runner on third only, and bases loaded. We're in the C position for all of those circumstances. All right. So we're going to start by talking about no runners on situations. No runners on. The thing that we're going to have to deal with from a crew perspective is fly balls to the outfield where the base umpire decides to go out. So fly balls to the outfield where the base umpire decides to go out. And the most important thing that we can do as the base umpire is take a read step. Okay. That action of stepping with your left foot onto the line as the ball is hit allows you to pause, read, and react to decide if we need to go out on this ball. And so going out on a ball will happen if we deem that ball to be trouble, meaning it's going to be a diving catch or a possible boundary decision like a home run or a ground rule double. So if we decide that this is a trouble ball, we then go out on the ball. And that's what that looks like. But it all starts with a read step and a pause, read, and react. While that's happening, our plate umpire, who is here in black, is watching the base umpire while he's moving out from behind home plate and saying, I will now take responsibility for this batter runner because my partner went out on the ball. So when we talk about the crew moving, when the base umpire goes out, the plate umpire then picks up the batter runner. And we'll see now the ball that gets down in front of the center fielder, and our plate umpire is going to take that play into second base, taking the batter runner into second base. This is bad mechanics on a trouble ball. And it happens because we have poor read step and poor pause, read, and react. So if you find yourself changing your mind about trouble balls in the outfield, it's not because you're bad at reading the ball. It's because you are not taking an appropriate read step and allowing yourself to pause, read, and react. Okay, so that is our no runners on system mechanic. No runners on system mechanic. Base umpire goes out, the plate umpire takes the play into second base. Now, in a situation where the base umpire decides that the ball is not trouble and comes in, the responsibility for that ball transitions to the plate umpire. So if the base umpire decides that the ball is not trouble and comes in, the plate umpire now assumes responsibility for the catch, no catch in the outfield. Another thing that we have to deal with is pop-ups. And a phrase that is very helpful as the base umpire is pop-up means pivot. Pop-ups to the infield, we need to get inside and protect second base in case the batter runner advances to second. Because in this situation, we have a fair foul decision on this pop-up to the infield, the plate umpire is going to assume that responsibility by moving on to the line and taking the fair foul and the catch, no catch on this play. Here's what happens when we don't understand that pop-up means pivot, right? So because we didn't pivot and go inside on this pop-up, we get stuck in this situation where the first baseman is going to come right at us, and we've got a nice mess on our hands there when we do it incorrectly.
Brian, you had a couple of good questions that just came through. In a two umpire system, do you believe in if you go out, stay out?
So I will say with all these two umpire system mechanics that you should consult whatever manual it is that you're working with. So if that's high school or college or American Legion or whatever, consult that manual and do what the manual says. Most manuals, when you go out as the base umpire, that if you think you can return and get to the plate in time to take a play on the batted runner at the plate, then you can do that. So that's the accepted mechanic there. I will say, I don't think I've ever seen that happen. So I'm not sure why exactly we do that, but check your manual in terms of if the base umpire goes out, should they come back and try to take a play on the batter runner at the plate? My man Coop asks about what about when the infield is in for a play at the plate? Coop, you're getting way ahead of yourself, baby. Chill. We'll get there. And then Joe Davis asks, is it okay to go the opposite of power with the batter with 2 outs and runners on second and third? No, I'm not a huge fan of making decisions like that. If you have a back pick at third base and you're all the way over in the B position, that's tough to justify. So, while I'm all for thinking outside the box, sometimes we just have to be a little bit safer. Okay, let's talk about rotations. Okay. So we have a couple different situations where we are going to rotate as the plate umpire. Let's define a rotation before we get started. A rotation is the plate umpire moving immediately towards third base to take a play on a runner advancing to third. And the key phrase here is a runner advancing. So we're not taking a play back into third. So once the runner rounds and goes back, we're taking a play into third base. There's a couple different situations where we are going to rotate. So let's talk about those. That would be a runner on first base only. So runner on first base only with base hits to the outfield. Also a runner on first and third with base hits to the outfield. We are going to rotate as the plate umpire to third base. The other situation in the two umpire system where we rotate is runners on first and second base with a caught fly ball and a runner tagging and advancing to third. That's the other situation where we are going to rotate. So let's look at some rotations done well and some rotations done poorly. So we have a runner on first base and a base hit. So as soon as the ball is hit, we are moving towards third with the plan of taking a play on this runner advancing to third base. So as soon as the ball is hit, we're rotating to third base and hoping to be there waiting for this runner as they advance. What we don't want to do is wait near the plate and then say, oh, it looks like there's going to be a play. Now I should get going. If we find ourselves arriving at the same time as that runner, that means that we're not reacting quickly enough to the development of this play. So rotations don't mean wait at the plate until a play is going to happen. They mean go right away. Go right away. Sometimes we don't have a play at third. So if all runners are going to continue to advance, there's a moment in that play when we need to decide there is no play at third. Now I need to return home. This is a bad example of a plate umpire waiting too long at third base and then racing home with that runner. So let's watch those again here for a second. So once you recognize that there is not a play on this runner advancing to third, get yourself home. Get yourself home. Versus waiting too long. I do see some stuff in the chat box about fair or foul. We're going to talk about that. I promise. So, one of the most commonly missed rotations is on a ground ball to the infield when we assume there should be a double play, or at least an attempted double play. And so, what I want to convince you of here is assume the ball is going to get to the outfield when it's hit. So the rotation is on as soon as the ball hits the bat. Once the fielder makes the play on this ball, now we can stop and go back towards the first base side of the diamond. So we're moving towards third, assuming there is going to be a rotation so that we can be there waiting for this runner. Because if we assume they're going to make a play, and then the ball gets through, we're never going to be there in time for that play. We can't assume that a fielder is going to make a play on a ball. There's only one situation in the 2-umpire system when we would not rotate to third as soon as the ball's hit. That situation is a batted ball down the right field line. Okay, so if we have a batted ball down the right field line, the fair foul responsibility for that batted ball goes to the plate umpire, and that means he is not going to be able to rotate towards third base. That's the one time in the 2-umpire system that we're not going to rotate immediately as the plate umpire. Let's move ahead here a little bit. Here's our bad example, assuming the shortstop's going to make the play, and we're late on our rotation. And that's a bad feeling. Let's talk about our other rotation, and that is first and second with a fly ball and a runner tagging. So as soon as the ball's hit, we're moving towards third and completing that rotation in time to be waiting for the arrival of that tagging runner. So we're moving right away, identifying that we have the likelihood of a caught ball, and then finishing that rotation all the way to third base. All the way to third base. Again, when we wait at the plate, when we wait, and now see that the play is going to happen, we're never going to be there in time, and we're not going to be in a very good position for that play. So rotations happen early. We should be waiting for plays to happen at third base when we rotate. Let's talk for a moment about where we take these plays, okay? Because I know that I'm doing something a little bit different than most of you have been taught. Let's identify the reason we move inside, okay? The reason we move inside on rotations is in case the ball gets thrown away. So if the ball gets thrown past the third baseman and there's the chance of a runner advancing home, being in the cutout allows you to have that ball and the runner in front of you as you progress home. But the reality of taking a play from the cutout is you are not going to be able to put yourself in the best possible position to see that tag. And so our approach with our more advanced umpires is to take care of the play at third base the best way you can. And that is have the runner sliding towards you. Now, this requires some athleticism and some instincts if we need to get home ahead of this runner. So if you're not comfortable with your ability to react quickly to a play that doesn't develop at third base and may go home, then take it from the cutout. We're going to talk more next week about wedge plays and how to put yourself in the best possible position to see tag plays. The simplest way to look at that is we want the runner to slide towards us so that we can see the moment that tag hits the body. That means on rotations, foul territory is the best place to take that play. But I understand that that's a little different than what some of the instruction is in the 2-umpire system. And so if you're newer and you want to play it safe, then go into the cutout. That's entirely fine. Taking a look at the questions here. Looks like everybody's concerned about me being in the cutout, so I'm glad we talked about that. And then last question here is, if you make a mistake and forget to rotate, do you communicate with your partner? Yes. Tell your partner that you've stayed home. One of the other bits of advice that I would offer is, as the base umpire, you shouldn't only be waiting to hear your partner get to third. You should be turning your head and looking at them. And that's a hack that's going to make you much better at the 3 umpire system when you get there. If you work in the 2 umpire system without ever turning your head and looking at your partner, the 3 umpire system is going to be much more difficult when you get there. So get used to not just listening for your partner, but also turning and looking at them so that you know that they've completed that rotation or really started that rotation. And I think we're about out of gas for the night, which is good because we're done. And I'm about worn out of talking. So I am happy to answer any questions. We had some people that had some stuff they wanted to ask last week at the end of the session. For now, I will say goodbye and thanks again for joining us for week 2 of our virtual workshop. I certainly hope everybody got something out of it tonight. We will post the video on our website and YouTube. Go check it out. And we'll see you back here again next Friday.
Hey, before everyone gets out of here, just a quick reminder for those of you in the Indianapolis area, we are going this coming Monday at 9 p.m. for in-person training. I do encourage each and every one of you to mark that down on your calendars and make your way out here to ProX Athlete, which is on campus at Grand Park. Again, that's for everyone in the Indianapolis area. This coming Monday, we will go 2 Mondays in a row starting at 9 p.m. And starting on July 25th at 8 o'clock p.m., we will then have live AB. So everyone come out, come enjoy yourself. A couple of guys will be coming in to help out. So come enjoy some in-person training, then we'll get right into some live ABs. There's no excuse to not be ready for this coming 2022 season. So again, thanks to you, Brian. Thanks to everybody that was out tonight. And if you have any more questions for Brian, please keep it short, please keep it simple, and we'll wrap this thing on up.
Thanks, Whit. I will say one last thing, and that is we want to see your videos of your at-home plate training. So if you set yourself up with some tape on the floor, a ball of socks, take a quick video of it, post it on Facebook or Instagram, and tag at United Umpires, and we'll throw that up onto our Facebook or Instagram pages. But we want to see people working on their craft at home and show that off to the rest of the umpiring world, because that's something that we're excited about. So take a quick video of yourself working on your plate stance or your tracking and tag us on social media.